What happens when imagination gets too far ahead of its time? In the 1960s, television dared to dream big. Alien invasions, time machines, giant worlds, and submarines battling monsters under the sea. But just as these shows began to soar, network executives pulled the plug. Was it poor ratings, high costs, or simply a world not ready for these futuristic visions? Stick around because some of the wildest stories in television history are waiting. The Time Tunnel, 1966-1967. Imagine being hurled through a swirling vortex of light and sound, landing in the middle of the Titanic disaster one week and on the battlefields of Troy the next. That was the pitch of The Time Tunnel, Irwin Allen's grand spectacle of time travel. Premiering in the fall of 1966, it was every kid's dream and every producer's nightmare. The effects were dazzling, the concept was bold, and the possibilities seemed endless. The series followed Dr. Tony Newman and Dr. Doug Phillips, two scientists trapped inside an experimental government project gone wrong. Each episode sent them ricocheting through history, unable to return home. One week, they'd try to warn Abraham Lincoln, the next, they'd be dodging dinosaurs. It was ambitious in every sense, a pure Saturday night, popcorn thrill ride, the kind of thing that could make you forget your homework. But here's the kicker. Despite a loyal audience and cliffhangers that had viewers gasping, ABC canceled it after just one season. The official excuse? Ratings. The truth? Time travel adventures weren't cheap, and television budgets in the mid-60s weren't ready to keep up with the kind of spectacle Allen demanded. The show's swirling tunnel alone looked like $1 million set piece every week. Even so, The Time Tunnel has lived on in reruns, DVD releases, and the memories of viewers who couldn't believe it all ended so quickly. It's the kind of show that proves just because something gets axed early doesn't mean it failed. In fact, it set the stage for every time travel adventure that followed. Canceled too soon? Absolutely, but unforgettable? Without question. The Invaders, 1967-1968. It was paranoia on primetime. The Invaders debuted in 1967 with one of the most unsettling premises of its decade. Aliens had already arrived. They looked like us. They lived among us. And only one-man architect David Vincent knew the truth. Week after week, Vincent tried to warn a disbelieving world while the aliens tightened their grip on society. Sound familiar? That's because it played right into Cold War fears and conspiracy whispers of the era. The hook was brilliant. The aliens could pass as human, but there was always a tell. Their stiff pinky finger, their emotionless stares, their need to regenerate in strange pods. And yet, nobody would believe Vincent. Each episode unfolded like a tense thriller, balancing science fiction with noir-style suspense. If The X-Files was the 90s, The Invaders was its 60s ancestor. But here's where it gets frustrating. Just as the tension built, ABC canceled it after 2 seasons. Why? The studio wanted fast ratings, and the slow burn style didn't always grab the masses. Critics said the show was too downbeat compared to the campy fun of Lost in Space. Still, those who stuck with it saw a visionary show exploring themes of paranoia, trust, and the fragility of truth. Over time, The Invaders became a cult classic. Its legacy echoed in countless invasion stories that followed from V in the 80s to conspiracy thrillers of later decades. Even though the show never gave Vincent a clear victory, its abrupt ending made it eerily fitting. A man alone fighting an enemy nobody else can see. Canceled too soon? Yes. But it's also the reason alien invasion stories feel so haunting today. Land of the Giants, 1968-1970. Imagine stepping off a plane and finding yourself in a world where every blade of grass towers over you like a tree, and even the most ordinary house cat looks like a roaring lion. That was the genius hook of Land of the Giants, one of Irwin Allen's most ambitious productions. Premiering in 1968, the series followed the crew and passengers of the suborbital spaceship Spindrift, which crash-landed on a planet nearly identical to Earth, except everything was 12 times larger. This wasn't just a sci-fi gimmick. The show leaned hard into survival storytelling. Every scene turned everyday objects into monstrous threats. A pencil became a pole vault challenge. A telephone cord could serve as a deadly snare. And when the human-sized heroes went up against the giant inhabitants of the planet, you could feel the terror in their eyes. The visuals were ahead of their time, with oversized props and clever camera tricks that made the illusion believable for 60s audiences. So, why didn't it last longer? 2 words: production costs. Building giant sets every week was no small task, and Irwin Allen's flair for spectacle often ran headfirst into ABC's budget ceilings. Ratings started strong, but couldn't keep pace with the money being poured into the special effects. After 2 seasons and 51 episodes, Land of the Giants was grounded for good. Yet, it didn't fade into obscurity. Fans still talk about the eerie scale, the sense of vulnerability, and the moral undertones, how humanity looked small and fragile in a world it couldn't control. Canceled too soon? Definitely. Land of the Giants proved that size isn't everything, but imagination sure is. Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, 1964, 1968. Before Star Trek boldly went into space, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea was already charting strange new frontiers deep below the ocean waves. Premiering in 1964, the show centered on the futuristic submarine Seaview, captained by Admiral Harriman Nelson and Commander Lee Crane. Each episode was part adventure, part science experiment, and part monster movie. The Seaview crew faced espionage plots, scientific anomalies, and yes, plenty of sea creatures that looked like they swam out of your worst nightmare. The first season played things relatively straight with Cold War undertones and grounded storylines. But as the 60s wore on, the series embraced campier, more imaginative elements, giant jellyfish, undersea aliens, and bizarre time warps. The mix of adventure and spectacle made it one of the most visually striking shows of its decade. The Seaview itself became an icon, a sleek submarine that looked like it was built for the future. So why did it vanish after 4 seasons? In truth, Voyage simply ran out of steam. The stories became repetitive, the monsters increasingly rubbery, and viewers began to drift away. Critics accused the show of prioritizing spectacle over substance, and by 1968, ABC pulled the plug. Still, for its time, Voyage was revolutionary. It pushed TV production into uncharted waters, delivering some of the wildest visuals ever seen on a 60s screen. Canceled too soon? Perhaps 4 seasons sounds like plenty, but given its ambition, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea could have evolved into something even bigger. Instead, it left behind waves of nostalgia and the memory of a submarine that once carried us to the edge of imagination. The Outer Limits, 1963, 1965. There is nothing wrong with your television set. Do not attempt to adjust the picture. If you grew up in the 1960s, those chilling words probably gave you goosebumps. That was The Outer Limits, an anthology series that dared to take viewers on a weekly journey into the strange, the unsettling, and the unknown. Premiering in 1963, it delivered stories that blurred the line between science fiction and horror with tales of aliens, mad scientists, and cosmic dread. Think of it as The Twilight Zone's darker cousin. While Rod Serling's classic often focused on irony and morality, The Outer Limits was all about mood atmosphere and fear of the unknown. One week you'd meet insect-like invaders. The next, you'd see an experiment gone terribly wrong. Special effects may have been limited, but the directors used lighting, sound, and clever makeup to create a sense of dread that lingers even today. The show was bold, but bold doesn't always translate into longevity. After only 2 seasons, The Outer Limits was canceled, mainly due to budget struggles and ratings that never quite matched its cult appeal. Some episodes were deemed too scary for primetime television, while others were simply misunderstood by a mainstream audience expecting lighter fare. Yet its legacy is massive. Gene Roddenberry cited it as an influence on Star Trek, and several of its actors and crew went on to shape the sci-fi landscape for decades. Even in reruns, its eerie opening narration still pulls you in, daring you to surrender control. Canceled too soon? Without question. The Outer Limits left viewers hungry for more proof that sometimes the scariest thing of all is the silence when the screen goes dark. Out of the Unknown, 1965, 1971. Imagine a television series that brought the greatest science fiction short stories of the 20th century to life. That was Out of the Unknown, a British anthology series launched in 1965. It wasn't about ray guns or rubber monsters, it was about ideas. Adaptations of works by Isaac Asimov, John Wyndham, Clifford D. Seamak, and other literary giants filled its episodes, making it one of the most ambitious sci-fi experiments ever attempted on television. Each story was different. One week, you might see a chilling look at artificial intelligence and the dangers of machines taking control. The next week, a time travel tale that asked hard questions about fate and free will. It was serious, intelligent, and sometimes unsettling, a rare thing in an era when sci-fi was often seen as kids' entertainment. So, what went wrong? For one, the BBC had a nasty habit of wiping tapes, and many of the show's episodes were simply erased. Imagine pouring all that creativity into the screen, only to have the evidence destroyed. On top of that, ratings were never blockbuster level. By 1971, the show was finished. But its influence lingered. It proved that television could handle big intellectual ideas just as powerfully as the printed page. Fans who've seen the surviving episodes still rave about the series' ambition and craftsmanship. Canceled too soon? Absolutely. Out of the Unknown is a reminder that sometimes the most important sci-fi doesn't give you easy answers. It leaves you asking the questions long after the credits roll. Counter-Strike, 1969. If the Invaders made you paranoid, Counter-Strike doubled down on the unease. Airing in 1969, this short-lived British series told the story of alien infiltrators threatening Earth from within. The twist? The main character, played by John Finch, was himself an alien, but one trying to protect humanity from the coming invasion. It was a clever spin on the familiar aliens among us trope, offering a hero caught between two worlds. The series had a sleek spy thriller vibe, mixing science fiction with espionage storytelling. You got coded messages, shadowy conspiracies, and strange encounters that blurred the line between earthly politics and cosmic stakes. The late 60s was prime time for paranoia, and Counter-Strike tapped directly into those anxieties. So, why didn't it last? Unfortunately, it only produced 10 episodes, with one never even making it to air. Some episodes are lost to time, and the network didn't give it a real chance to build momentum. With competition from louder, flashier shows, Counter-Strike slipped through the cracks. Today, the surviving material gives us a fascinating look at what might have been. A blend of spy drama and alien invasion tale, it had the potential to stand alongside classics like The Avengers or Doctor Who. Canceled too soon? No question. Counter-Strike is a lost gem, the kind of show that makes you wonder how many great ideas television buried before they had time to bloom. Fireball XL5, 1962, 1963. Long before CGI and high-tech miniatures, Fireball XL5 blasted off with nothing more than puppets models and a lot of imagination. Created by Jerry Anderson, the king of supermarionation, this show premiered in 1962 and gave kids a space opera they'd never forget. The story followed Colonel Steve Zodiac and his crew aboard the Fireball XL5 patrolling Sector 25 of the galaxy as part of the World Space Patrol. Every episode delivered pulpy adventure. The XL5 battled alien threats, explored strange planets, and raced against cosmic dangers. For a puppet show, it had surprising ambition. The ship's design was sleek, its missions felt larger than life, and its crew had the kind of charisma that could make you forget you were watching strings. Even the theme song became an earworm that stuck with fans for decades. But like so many great sci-fi experiments, Fireball XL5 was short-lived. It lasted just one season with 39 episodes before being retired. Some said the puppet format limited its audience. Others blamed costs. But for the kids who grew up glued to their televisions, it felt like a world-ending cancellation. And here's the legacy. Fireball XL5 set the stage for everything Jerry Anderson would do next, from Thunderbirds to Captain Scarlet. Its vision of space as a frontier of endless adventure helped spark an entire generation's fascination with the stars. Canceled too soon? Absolutely. Fireball XL5 proved that even with marionettes, you could make space feel epic. Stingray, 1964, 1965. If Fireball XL5 took us to the stars, Stingray plunged us deep beneath the ocean. Another Jerry Anderson creation, Stingray premiered in 1964 and followed Captain Troy Tempest and the World Aquanaut Security Patrol as they defended Earth's seas in the futuristic submarine Stingray. While other 60s shows were playing with outer space, this one turned the ocean into a frontier just as mysterious. The series was groundbreaking. It was the first British TV show filmed entirely in color, and the underwater sets were jaw-dropping for their time. Puppet characters moved through oceans filled with dazzling model work, and every week there was a new aquatic threat: sea monsters, hostile undersea civilizations, or catastrophic natural disasters. But here's what made it stand out: the sense of wonder. The undersea sequences gave viewers an atmosphere unlike anything else on television. Even though the characters were puppets, the adventures carried a dramatic weight that made it feel like serious science fiction for young audiences. So, why did it vanish after just 39 episodes? The official reason was that Jerry Anderson was already moving on to his next big project, Thunderbirds. Networks also saw Stingray as more of a children's show, limiting its broader appeal. Still, those who remember it know it was ahead of its time. Canceled too soon? Definitely. Stingray showed that the ocean could be every bit as strange and thrilling as outer space. And while it may have been overshadowed by Thunderbirds, it remains a shimmering gem from a decade when imagination knew no limits. Out of This World, 1962. Before, The Outer Limits gave us nightmares, and before Out of the Unknown made us think there was. Out of This World, a British anthology series that aired in 1962. Hosted by horror legend Boris Karloff, it was an ambitious attempt to bring serious science fiction stories to the small screen. Adaptations of works by Ray Bradbury and Clifford D. Symock filled its 13 episodes, offering audiences intelligent tales of aliens, time travel, and futuristic dilemmas. What made it unique was its tone. Out of This World treated science fiction with respect at a time when many still dismissed the genre as cheap thrills. Karloff's introductions added gravitas, setting the stage for stories that were often eerie, thought-provoking, and far ahead of the television curve. But here's the heartbreak. The BBC wiped most of the episodes, leaving only one intact today. Imagine an entire treasure chest of sci-fi gems simply thrown away. For those who did see it, the series stood out for its bold storytelling and willingness to take risks. It didn't just want to entertain, it wanted to challenge viewers. Why was it canceled? Partly because it was expensive to produce, and partly because it didn't pull the kind of ratings networks craved. Anthology shows were always a gamble, and Out of This World simply didn't get the chance to mature. Canceled too soon, without doubt. Out of This World planted the seeds for later, more famous anthology shows. It may be largely lost, but its legacy whispers through every ambitious sci-fi story that followed. The Stranger, 1964. Not every groundbreaking sci-fi series of the 1960s came from the United States or the United Kingdom. In Australia, a little-known gem called The Stranger premiered in 1964 and gave audiences one of the first locally produced science fiction dramas on television. The story began quietly enough. A mysterious man arrives at a school and takes a job as a teacher. But he isn't just any ordinary newcomer. He's an alien visitor searching for a new home for his endangered people. Unlike many flashy effects-heavy shows of the decade, The Stranger relied on atmosphere and story. Its power came from the unease of not knowing who this outsider truly was and how humanity would react if the truth were discovered. At times, it felt more like a slow-burn drama than pure sci-fi, exploring themes of identity, belonging, and fear of the unknown. For audiences in the mid-60s, it was a fresh perspective. Most sci-fi of the era focused on defending Earth from alien invasions. This time, the alien wasn't a threat, but a sympathetic figure, a refugee seeking sanctuary. It was thoughtful, emotional, and years ahead of its time. So, why did it fade away after just 2 series? Budget constraints and limited international reach doomed it. Australia didn't yet have the industry infrastructure to support long-running genre television, and the show struggled to find an audience outside its home country. Yet, The Stranger remains historically important. It proved that sci-fi could be more than ray guns and monsters. It could be human, reflective, and surprisingly moving. Canceled too soon? Absolutely. The Stranger left behind only a brief run, but its daring approach helped open the door for future international sci-fi television. So, there you have it. 12 bold sci-fi series from the 1960s that burned bright and vanished far too soon. Some were too expensive, some too strange, and some simply too far ahead of their time. But every one of them left fingerprints on the genre we love today. Which of these lost gems would you bring back if you could? Drop your thoughts in the comments, subscribe for more retro deep dives, and keep exploring the unknown.